Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with another episode of Prime Minister's Questions for Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday, the 15th of May, 2024. How are you all doing today? Hope you're all doing well. We're just live here on YouTube, not dual streaming today, just here on YouTube. Axmag, good to see you there, buddy, and MadMonk33, good to see you both there. I hope you guys are well. Hope you're having a good week so far. We've got two lives. We've got today, we've got this live stream, and we've got another one later on with the Snowflakes Watch. I'll be covering various stories tonight as well. I have a couple more one or two more videos to record for the channel, and then they will be available to members. Some of you guys may have seen some short member videos were available this morning that's just popped up. I've just got a couple more to do. I've got a follow-up video on the one that went viral on the weekend as well. I have a follow-up video. I literally only recorded it just about an hour ago as well, so that's going to be a really good one to talk about as well. It's regarding LBC and a bit more about the story behind global player, a global media sort of thing, and a bit more the naissance of it. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk today about Prime Minister's Questions, and we're going to be looking into Prime Minister's Questions with it in just a few moments. I'm just going to have a quick look and just see. Kemi Bakanock is talking, so we're definitely going to keep the mic muted. That is for sure. Then again, it's been interested to watch this. Interesting. Yeah. Good to see you, David. Hope you're doing well, buddy. I'm wondering if there's going to be another defection. Some people think there's going to be another defection. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see if there is going to be one. If you spot one and I don't pay attention, please let me know in the comments, because just because I may be a bit clumsy and not paying attention. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, I don't know, the more regurgitating of some of the same things. Obviously. Interesting, there was an exclusive today as well from The Guardian with regards to the Chancellor, and you'll hear more about the story. The Chancellor is apparently cutting the budget for the people working on the Rwandan scheme within the head office, which is quite an interesting one to say. Quite interesting, which kind of baffles me, that story. So do check that video out whenever that comes around as well. And yeah, I mean, today is this. I mean, we expect Rishi Sunak to get a pounding again. Will he push the Jeremy Corbyn button? Well, he pushed it. He pushed it, didn't he? With his speech on Monday. So it's a very good chance that the Jeremy Corbyn button may be pushed. It's very, very likely that he may do so. Stephen Flynn's attack lines have been a lot on Gaza, and he may continue with those lines of questioning. And I think they are perfectly justifiable questions. That's absolutely sure. Oh God, not her. I'm not mentioning the person who's talking right now. I'll show you guys just on the. We'll come to just the screen here. I can still see you guys talking at the moment, but yeah, we're just hit the 12 o'clock mark now, so it should be starting any moment. I've not seen the Prime Minister take his seat, so he should be taking it shortly. So people are making their moves now, so it looks like a PM may be coming in any moment. But yeah, I like to get it up just a bit early, get PMQs just a couple of minutes early, just for you guys, if you guys want to ask any questions or whatever, as well. But is he finally coming in? It looks like he's finally coming in, so we could be starting in just a moment. I think we're starting now.
Not sure the Chief Whip is. Right, we now come to Prime Minister's Questions. Jonathan Lord.
Question number one, Mr. Speaker.
Any issues with volume, let me know, guys.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jonathan Lord.
Residents across the eastern villages of Woking in Byfleet, West Byfleet and Pyrford have seen a large number of proposed developments over recent years. Of particular concern is an area of beautiful fields near West Hall, where over 1,000 of my constituents have written back to me in recent weeks expressing their deep concerns about the lack of provision of local infrastructure and the potential effects on the local environment. My residents and I will fight on, but does the Prime Minister agree with me that Labour's proposals to concrete over vast swathes of the Greenbelt in Surrey and the South East would be a complete calamity?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Unlike actually both the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party, who believe in top-down targets that would decimate the Greenbelt, we believe in local people having a say over their local communities, which is why we are making sure that we make best use of brownfield land and ensuring that we conserve and enhance our precious countryside for generations to come.
We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, the Prime Minister treated us to his 7th relaunch in 18 months. He vowed to take on the dangers that threaten the country. So it was good to see the Minister for Common Sense immediately take up that mantle by announcing a vital crackdown on the gravest of threats, colourful lanyards. Meanwhile, in the real world, after 14 years of Tory government, the prison system is in chaos.
Yes.
Does the Prime Minister think that his decision to let prisoners out 70 days early makes our country more secure?
Very good question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, civil service impartiality is an important principle that we're right to support, but perhaps he could ask his Chief of Staff about that. But actually on Monday, what I did do is outline the serious security threats that our country faces from an axis of authoritarian states. Russia poisoning people on our streets, China targeting our democracy, Iranian proxies firing on British ships, and yet he won't back our plan to increase defence spending. Now, we all know why, especially with the Deputy Leader and indeed the Shadow Foreign Secretary who voted to scrap our nuclear deterrent. It's clear that you simply can't trust Labour with our country's security.
Can't trust you lot.
Well, I appreciate he's been busy on the front line of the war against lanyards, but he must have missed this. I was the first to call for 2.5% on defence spending. The last time it happened was under the last Labour government, but it needs a credible plan, not his fantasy economics.
Yes.
But I am disappointed to see that version 7.0 of his time in office doesn't extend as far as answering questions or giving any information on those prisoners he is releasing early. Basic details like how many, where are they, what crimes have they committed. So will he at least guarantee that none of the criminals he is instructing prisoners to release early are considered high risk?
That makes total logical sense. If they are low deemed risk, ones of theft of some sorts, like low-key crimes, I don't see why not. But there's another perfectly reasonable question into this. Like, this idea of obviously trying to mitigate the overcrowding of the prison system. But I've covered extensively, as you guys are known on the channel, about how bad our prisons are right now, and it's pretty horrifying to say the least. Good to see you there, Jim Stevenson, Alistair Kidd. Good to see you guys. Hope you're doing well. But obviously, we're expecting more waffle from Sunak with regards to his answer.
Mr. Speaker, there are strict eligibility criteria in place with exclusions based on public safety, and no one will be put on the scheme if they were deemed a threat to public safety. But he talks about 2.5%, Mr. Speaker. So if he does think it is important, as I think he just actually stood up and acknowledged that it was the right thing to do, we've got a fully funded plan to actually deliver an increase in defence spending, and it's him and his party who have refused to match that commitment.
Yeah, remember, they have money for defence, right? They got money for defence, but they don't have money for NHS doctors and nurses. Remember that, yeah? They have money for defence, they don't have money for NHS doctors and workers. Let's just remember that, yeah?
Just like his £46 billion fully funded. If anyone was looking for the perfect metaphor for this shambolic government. We saw it on Monday. The Prime Minister woke up deciding his latest rebrand was Mr. Security. But within hours, the Tory party was being investigated for accidentally publishing the personal details of hundreds of people. Mr. Speaker, he must be the only tech brother on the continent who can't work a debit card or send an email.
What's wrong, Keir?
But he's not answered my question, so I'll try it again. Are any of the prisoners he is currently letting out early considered to be high risk?
It's a bit of a stumble there from
Mr.
the
Speaker,
opposition leader.
he just showed spectacularly why he's just not fit to lead this country into the future.
And you are. Excuse me? Wolfpack, good to see you there, buddy. Hope you're doing well. Like, yes, Keir Starmer stumbled there. Yes, no question. But do we really want another 4 more years or 5 more years of you guys? I don't think we want any more of you. I really don't think we do. You know, if we are stuck between choosing a red pill and a blue pill, guys, you're going to swallow. You got to take one of these 2 dangerous pills. You've been taking the blue pill for a very long time, guys, and you don't like it. It's making you worse. It's making you bad. Now, you've been told things about the red pill. The red pill may be really bad for you. It may be good for you. They've said a lot of things. But are you still going to keep taking the blue pill? Or are you going to try to take your chance with the red pill? Answers on a postcard, please.
This country has a proud tradition of leading the world. We led the world when it came to the Industrial Revolution. But if he was around, he would have probably called James Watt the steam bro, Mr. Speaker. But what we're doing is preparing the country for the future. But when he talks about the prison scheme, let me be crystal clear. No one would be put on the scheme if they were deemed a threat to the public. Offenders are subject to the toughest of licensing conditions. And if those conditions are broken, they are back in prison for considerably longer. But what's his record on this? He voted against tougher sentences for violent criminals. He actually opposed new powers for the police to tackle violent crime, voted against new laws that have arrested 1,000 criminal people smugglers. The message is crystal clear. He can't be trusted to keep this country safe.
Now, of course, we agree that there are absolutely questions and whatnots about Labour. There's absolutely no question about it. But we certainly don't trust you. We do not trust you. And your record and your party's record for the last 14 years speaks a lot more volumes, Prime Minister. Hello, Georgie. Good to see you there. Hope you're doing well.
I appreciate that all this rebranding is taking all of his time, but he may want to read the recent inspection report into Lewis Prison. On this topic, I've asked him twice about. It documents, page 5, high-risk prisoners being released at short notice without sufficient planning. Page 46, a high-risk prisoner had his release date brought forward, despite a history of stalking, domestic abuse and a restraining order. Their words, he was a risk to children.
That's horrible.
Does the early release of stalkers, domestic abusers, and those considered a risk to children sound like the work of someone who is making the country more secure?
That's
Mr.
brutal.
Speaker, as I've said, no one should be put on this scheme if they are a threat to the public. And let me be crystal clear, it does not apply. And let me be absolutely clear, it does not apply to anyone serving a life sentence, anyone convicted of a serious violent offence, anyone convicted of terrorism, anyone convicted of a sex offence. And crucially, in contrast to the system that Labour had put in place, Mr. Speaker, governors in the prison service have an absolute lock so that no one is put on the scheme who shouldn't be. But thankfully, Mr. Speaker, their scheme let out thousands upon thousands of violent offenders onto our streets, and even 2 terrorists. Thankfully, we've toughened up sentencing against those criminals with new legislation, but he voted against it, Mr. Speaker.
Didn't answer the question. That's a very, you not take seriously the bloody question here. Talking about letting people out And he's just regurgitating the same goddamn answers here. That's a very serious question. I hate when things as serious as this, and it doesn't matter to the Prime Minister. It just doesn't matter. Like even when the most heartbreaking of stories are told to the Prime Minister, like he might say, "I'm very sorry," but then he just then regurgitates to his same pathetic lies and shamefulness all the goddamn time. It's so demoralizing to know that we have a billionaire Prime Minister who lacks any compassion or care about people. Really does.
Well, I'm glad to hear that those on life sentences are being released early, and he may not think that releasing domestic abusers is a problem. But Labour has repeatedly called for domestic abusers to be exempt from his scheme to release prisoners early. His government has shamefully ignored those calls. So now we have the evidence that domestic abusers are being released early. The Lewis report, Prime Minister. Will he finally change course and back Labour's calls?
Mr. Speaker, as I've been crystal clear, there is an absolute governor lock on people who are put on the scheme. And in contrast to the last Labour scheme, prisoners were let out with no supervision, no electronic tags. In fact, 80,000 offenders were let out. 16,000 were violent, Mr. Speaker, leading to multiple murders committed. We fixed that system.
Does anyone actually believe what Prime Minister Sunak has said, considering how much he has lied in the past? Does anyone actually believe this? It's entirely possible that maybe Labour have let some people out on earlier, but in terms of the numbers that he's talking, does he have any statistical evidence to back this up? I'm very sceptical.
But when it comes to this question, not only are we building the biggest prison programme in history, we're also deploying rapid deployment cells. And, Mr. Speaker, because on this side of the House, we understand the importance of prison. Unlike one of his front...
You understand the importance of prisons, which is why you've allowed the prisons to get overcrowded. I've literally covered a story with regards to the Lewis report, from an exclusive from Open Democracy that details how some of the conditions of some of the people are treated in. We're talking about like just one of many examples of how inhumane that prisoners are being treated. In one of the women's prisons, right, women do not even have proper clothes. Women do not even have the privacy, these women in prisons, to actually go to the toilet properly. There have been cases of some prisoners having to go to the toilet in a bin because they don't have an adequate toilet for them. Where's none of this being addressed, let alone just about releasing them? Talking about prisons when we've read reports, and I've covered it here on this channel, and I've covered it in the past about how bad the prison systems are. And he's talking here like he cares about the prison service. He's not shown any evidence to support this. It's just words from him. Empty words.
Benchers who said, one of his front benchers, and I said, who quote, "Prison doesn't prevent crime." It's always the same with the Labour Party, soft on crime and soft on criminals.
He's literally letting criminals out early. Mr. Speaker, the only answer to the question I asked, whether domestic abusers should be exempt from his early release scheme from anyone serious about security, is yes. Perhaps the most ludicrous part of the Prime Minister's speech on Monday was when he said he won't accept the idea that any of the problems people are facing are caused by the 14 years of Conservative government. He won't say how many prisoners they've released early. He won't say if they're burglars, abusers or stalkers. He won't say where they are or what support their victims are getting. Yet he thinks he has the right to tell people they can't blame his government for any of it. Doesn't he think that rather than confiscating lanyards like some jumped-up milk monitor, he should stop issuing get-out-of-jail cards free to prisoners considered a risk to children?
Mr. Speaker, another week with no ideas and absolutely no plan for the country. They've had They've had 14 years to think about nothing but the future, but all they can do is talk about the past, Mr. Speaker. But I am surprised, because what he didn't bring up that has happened in the last week since we met is that statistics confirm that we have now had the joint fastest growth rate in the G7 this year.
Oh
Mr.
my
Speaker.
God, not this
The Bank of
again.
England said that the economy had turned a corner. Ian White said our growth was impressive. The chief economist of the Independent Office for National Statistics said the economy is going gangbusters, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Shadow Chancellor may want to copy and paste their comments into her next speech. Or does she think they're all gaslighting the British public too?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I understand the need to upgrade our broadband infrastructure, it cannot be right that a company called Brisk is proposing to erect telegraph poles in the Squirrels estate in Hayley Green in my constituency. So, would the Prime Minister agree with me that residents are 100% opposed to these proposals and they go against the guidance? So would the Prime Minister agree with me that they should abandon these proposals, that they should that we should have a review of permitted development rights in relation to this type of infrastructure, and he should give Ofcom greater power to investigate breaches?
Am I the only one who thinks this Conservative clearly struggling with his question here? I really don't know if he's... Okay, polls. Okay. What's he worried about? The poll might like block someone's view or something? Is that what it is? So, like, I'm sorry, but am I the only one who thinks that internet is kind of important to certain areas? I think he's stretching a bit here, but it seems like a pointless question to me.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for rightly championing the views of his constituents on this important topic. Network operators have to follow legal obligations when deploying their networks, and Ofcom can in fact investigate reports of failure to follow these obligations. And I know that the Minister for Digital Infrastructure has met the sector and Ofcom recently to raise concerns about reports of poor poll sighting, asked operators to share infrastructure, and I will ask her specifically to provide my honourable friend with a more detailed update.
Leader Stephen Flynn.
Okay, common sense.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the Prime Minister outlined what he considers to be extremist threats to our society. And in doing so, he actively compared North Korea, Iran and Russia with those people in Scotland who believe in independence. So can I ask him to rise once to the standards befitting of his office and apologise for those puerile and pathetic remarks?
Disgusting.
Mr. Speaker, that's not what I said, but I would say to the honourable gentleman that his party is indeed a threat to the integrity of the United Kingdom. And I hate to remind him, but that's literally their entire purpose, Mr. Speaker, because when the people of Scotland accepted the referendum in 2014, it was the SNP who didn't. They went on creating a Minister for Independence, focused on constitutional wrangling, ignoring the needs of the people. Education standards falling, taxes rising. So actually, finally, he should do the right thing and end the obsession with independence and put the needs of the Scottish people first.
Let's let me just take this a step back as an Englishman, on the outside of when it comes to the 2014 Scottish referendum in 2014. Yeah, one of the key things in that that was made, that was not kept, that the Scottish people were promised, and this is very important, people remember this, they were told that we would not, in any way, shape or form, be leaving the EU, there would not be any kind of EU referendum or any kind of sort before that 2014 independence referendum on Scotland. Let's be very clear about that. Yeah? They were lied to. Okay? That is a fundamental fact that they were lied to. The Scottish people were lied to by the British government, by the Remain group to remain with the union. They were lied on that matter. So as far as I'm concerned, it's null and void. And not only that, it is undemocratic to deny if the majority want a vote, they should be given the vote. So why deny that?
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. What the Prime Minister did was not just equate my colleagues and I to despotic and dangerous despots across the world. He proactively compared almost half of the Scottish population with a war criminal like Vladimir Putin. And he did so as their Prime Minister, as the man who represents them on the world stage and the man who on these aisles is tasked with defending their liberties and their democracy. Now, we know that his sorry time in office is rapidly coming to a conclusion. Is this really how he wants to be remembered?
He honestly doesn't care, Stephen. You're absolutely right in saying that it should be how he remembered. It doesn't matter what happens between now and in his time for himself, because he will always be remembered as the first Hindu British Prime Minister. It's in the history books. Regardless, he will always be remembered for that. He will be remembered as the first, and nothing will ever take that away from him. He will always be remembered in history. Stephen Banker, good to see you, buddy. Hope you're doing well. That's the reality of it. And getting any kind of an apology from Rishi Sunak is impossible. It's absolutely impossible.
Mr. Speaker, as ever, distracting from the actual record of what the SNP are doing in Scotland. And this obsession with independence means that Scottish school children are being let down, plummeting down international league tables. The Scottish NHS, the only place in the United Kingdom where funding is actually falling in real terms, and taxes going up for ordinary hard-working families and small businesses. That is what the SNP are doing in Scotland, while this UK government is delivering for them.
It's funny how the polls don't seem to agree with you on that, Sunak. It's almost as if you're lying to the realities of what's going on. I mean, the vast majority of the public that I hear when they think of you or hear about you kind of want to turn away from the cameras or even speak about you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating Uxbridge College, who have recently entered into a pioneering partnership with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology? This is groundbreaking work for the further education sector, and it's going to have great benefits for local businesses and local students, for the education sector and for the local economy.
Well, I join my honourable friend in congratulating Uxbridge College and the West London Institute of Technology for their collaboration with MIT. This is equipping students with the skills of the future and that local businesses require. And that's very much the story of this government, Mr. Speaker. The biggest long-term settlement for post-16 education in this country in years. A proud record of creating over 5.5 million apprenticeships since 2010, providing opportunity for all while the party opposite wants to halve the number of apprenticeships and put a brake on people's aspirations.
And also, while he's drumming all that information in, universities are struggling when it comes to students. Lots of international students are no longer coming to the UK anymore now as well, which means that fundings for these universities are going to be less than they were before. I wonder what was the result of that, you guys. What do you think the result of that is?
Okay. My party, Plaid Cymru, has secured a crucial win for our farmers as Labour in Wales are forced to pause the sustainable farming scheme. We've done our bit for farmers. Now it's time the Prime Minister did his. Harmful trade deals and Brexit checks are hitting our world-famous Welsh lamb and beef. Will he, therefore, guarantee to Welsh farmers that he will never again sign a deal that threatens their interests?
Of course he's... Do you honestly think they give two? Do you honestly think the Prime Minister and this Brexit party give two hoots about Welsh farms, English farms, or even Scottish farms for that matter? They don't care. That's why they signed the deals that they did. Yeah, to make things, the whole deal with the CTPPP, whatever the hell its slogan is. You know, those deals that we made with Australia and New Zealand, those so-called Brexit trade deals, gave up so much concessions. This man does not care. They just care about the headlines to say Brexit is a great idea. And they're willing to trash Britain's industries in order to make it seem like Brexit is a good idea as well.
Well, perhaps, Mr. Speaker, if the Honourable Lady cared about Welsh farmers, she should stop propping up the Welsh Labour government.
Don't answer the question.
It was actually the work of the Welsh Conservatives that ensured that there was a spotlight on the Labour government's proposals in Wales, which would have led to thousands of job losses, less food security for our country, and destroyed rural incomes. Farmers rightly described it as bleak, damaging and shocking, just like the Labour Party's approach to rural Britain.
Mr. Speaker, Barnet Hospital A&E is expanding. Finchley Memorial Hospital has had its diagnostics hub boosted by new equipment, and there are more appointments in general practice locally than there were before the pandemic, but I still have constituents who are waiting too long for NHS care. So can I urge the Prime Minister to redouble his efforts to grow the NHS workforce and get waiting times down?
No.
Delighted to hear about the new Community Diagnostic Centre in my honourable friend's local hospital, and we are working tirelessly to reduce the overall NH waiting list, which has come down by around 200,000 since September of last year, and that is an achievement in light
Thanks for popping by, Jim.
of the pressures from industrial action. But she's right, there's more to do, which is why our productivity plan will free up clinicians to spend more time with patients, and, to her point, our long-term plan for the NHS will ensure that we train more doctors and more nurses to meet the workforce requirements the NHS has for the future.
Richard Bagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 30,000 Palestinian deaths, not enough to move this Prime Minister to end arms sales to Israel. The killing...
It's actually 35,000 actually, but it's still disgusting to say the least.
...of British aid workers, not enough to move the Prime Minister to end arms sales. It even seems that, unlike the US, an all-out assault on Rafah, with all the death and destruction that would entail, wouldn't be enough. So just what on earth would be enough to finally move this Prime Minister into the same position as the majority of the British public and end arms sales to Israel?
Mr. Speaker, I'd just point out to the honourable gentleman that the UK government does not directly sell arms to Israel, unlike the US, and nor does the UK government offer any military lethal aid packages to Israel, as the US does. So he should not conflate these issues.
Let's be very clear. There are weapons factories in England that are creating weapons that are going towards that. While some may... You're claiming they're not going to Israel, okay? You're claiming that. You're stating that in this house, right? But we know that components and military equipment and weapons are going to America and other sort nations, then going to Israel. So by in all, we are still supplying weapons and arms to Israel, even if it is not directly going to Israel. Why not turn these factories off then, Prime Minister?
As part of the government's robust arms control regime, we do regularly review advice to ensure compliance with international law, and ministers act in accordance with that advice. Our position with regard to export licences, as he knows, is unchanged following the most recent assessment, and it is indeed in line with other partners, including the United States.
Done. As a member of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, I was delighted that the Prime Minister found time yesterday to ignite the light of liberation at the start of its journey to Normandy to commemorate sacrifices made for the liberation of Europe. Will my right honourable friend join me this War Graves week in confirming that standing up to tyrants who bring about war in Europe is as much in our national interest today as it was 80 years ago.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his work as a commissioner on the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. And he raises an important point about authoritarian states with different values to ours becoming increasingly assertive. So it is right that we build our security in uncertain times, defending and protecting our country, our values and our interests. That's why we've made the generational decision to increase our defence spending. And it's crystal clear that it's only the Conservative Party that can be trusted with our nation's security.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On the 2nd of June, the Leavenmouth Railway reopens after years of community campaigning. But just at that point, TSB have announced that they are closing their Leven Bank branch. Loss of banks hollow out communities, and they're an impediment to small businesses as well. Now, Cash Access UK have said that they're going to roll out 100 by the end of the year banking hubs, and FCA are consulting. But can the Prime Minister accept that the government has been too slow on this, and what else is he going to do to prevent these banking deserts from emerging?
Well, Mr Speaker, as I've said repeatedly from this dispatch box, it's imperative that banks and building societies recognise the needs of all customers, including those who still need to use in-person cash services, and that's why we legislated to protect access to cash as part of the Financial Services and Markets Act, and as a result, customers can access cash and banking services through a wide range of channels, including post offices, ATMs, telephone and other services, but including community initiatives like banking hubs.
Alberto Costa.
I just want to say this. Obviously, Labour's proposal about initiating more banking hubs is, from my opinion, is a very good thing and a vital thing needed. I've talked about this already about the needs for something like this. As many banks now are closing up shops, especially in rural areas, it's much harder for them. And while yes, of course, people can get access to cash in shops and post offices and whatnot there with ATMs and that, people still need to be able to. There are cases where people need to go into a bank and consult somebody with regards to them. They are still vital for some people. It's not just a case of just setting up banking online for some people. We are not at the point where everything needs to be online. We're not at that point yet in society. We haven't moved quick enough yet for that. And we need to have still branches out there. And they need to be and at the moment, if you're not going to have branches closed, and you need to have more banking hubs. And I agree with what she said, that more needs to be done to tackle this, because it's not right that people have to travel very long distance just to go to a bank branch to sort out whatever issues that they need to sort out, because they can't do it by phone or they can't do it online. And there are still cases where the older generation don't know how to use the internet and are much easier when it comes to in-person banking, when they have that face-to-face communication about any issues that they have. So it's a very important issue.
Double child rapist and murderer Colin Pitchfork is yet again having another parole hearing in the next few weeks. As well as the brutal murders, this man exposed himself to over 1,000 girls and women. Now, as MP for South Leicestershire, I distributed a constituency-wide survey asking my constituents about parole board reform. Because the problem, Mr Speaker, is that the reconsideration mechanism rules allow Mr Pitchfork to keep asking for a reconsideration of a reconsidered decision, limitless times and cost-free to him. So, can I ask the Prime Minister if he will arrange a meeting between myself and the Justice Secretary to discuss necessary changes to the reconsideration mechanism rules? And will he arrange for me to be able to deliver the findings of the survey, where thousands of constituents have responded, to his number 10 policy team?
I absolutely agree in what he is saying about those who are convicted, especially of convictions of criminals of such like the one he has talked about, and about how they are able to consistently re-appeal their parole hearing. I totally accept that premise. I generally believe that I think, yes, I do agree that it should be looked into. I agree with him. Now, as of right now, I don't know the specific details of the parole, But what I will say is this, is that depending on the case, the crime that they have committed, depending on the crime that they have committed on their appeal, there should be, in my opinion, rather than a permanent reappeal board, there should be a long gap in between, and that time of period of when they can have another parole hearing should depend on the crime that they have committed. Depending on the crime they have committed and the duration of time that they have been put by the judge in their court, it should be categorized, that parole hearing, depending on the crime that they have committed, in my opinion. Now, in this person's case that he has brought up, and while I don't know the extensities of this case, what I will say is it should be, if he is that he should he be allowed to reappeal, I suppose, depending, because of the severity of this case, and I think is a very serious issue. A part of me feels like no, he shouldn't because of his crimes, but another part of me feels that do we not want to give people a second chance as well? I am not going to lie, on this particular case, I'm very torn on this one. So I don't really have a straight answer on this. But in terms of paroles overall, and especially, of course, if it costs taxpayers money to continuously have these parole boards as well, that's a major issue as well. But hopefully I had a best understanding on it.
Can I commend my honourable friend, the member for South Leicestershire, for his tireless campaigning about this case? And I know that the whole House will join me in recognising the horror of the crimes committed by Colin Pitchfork and sending our condolences to the victims' families. Now, we are reforming the parole system to add a ministerial check on the release of the most dangerous criminals and changing the law so that society's most depraved killers, life means life. But I will, of course, arrange for the findings of my honourable friend's survey to be properly.
If their cases, if their sentence is life, then they shouldn't be allowed to appeal. Then, if their case is life, they should not be allowed to appeal.
Be considered, and will ensure that he meets with the Justice Secretary to discuss his proposals further.
Yeah, if their case is life, then they should not be allowed to appeal. They should not be allowed to appeal. But if it's not a life sentence, then there needs to be something arranged. There needs to be something looked into. But I would say again, it would depend on it depends on what the crime is, what the sentence is. Those factors obviously need to play into it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In Gaza, Israel has attacked hospitals, it's attacked refugee camps, and it has killed aid workers. Israel has blocked vital aid, turned off water supplies, and denied access to food. Israel has killed thousands upon thousands of innocent civilians as the world watches, trampling all over international humanitarian law. No other country would be allowed to act with such impunity. So, can the Prime Minister tell me why he allows Israel to get away with it unchallenged, and why he continues to act as a bystander to such horror?
Mr. Speaker, well, we do support, and I do support Israel's right to defend itself and remove the threat that Hamas, the terrorist organisation, poses to its people. But I am also deeply concerned about the growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and have consistently made that point at this dispatch box and to Prime Minister Netanyahu. We must.
And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has laughed in your face because, yeah, you really don't. You're just playing a puppet, Sunak. You don't care about what's happening there. You don't, because you don't want to upset Israel. You don't want to upset Israel, and you don't want to upset those who have influence within your government that represent Israel as well. That is the truth.
see further action to ensure more aid gets to people who desperately need it. The Rafah and the Kerem-Shalom crossing must be open to allow more aid in. We're doing everything we can, trebling our investment, trying to get aid in by land, air and sea, and currently working with allies to build a temporary pier. But she can rest assured that we, on this side of the House, will continue to do everything we can to get support to the people in Gaza who need it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, along with apprentices from the nuclear fuel company Urenco, I visited Coleg Menai in Llangefni. The students were excited, but they need certainty about the future of Wilva before they commit to a career in nuclear. Can the Prime Minister confirm when Great British Nuclear will decide if Wilva will be a gigawatt or an SMR site, when my students can expect to see spades in the ground, and when can his brilliant nuclear minister visit Wilva again to announce some good news?
Why do I feel like kids and students would be excited about nuclear power? Would they not be more interested in green energy? Am I just jumping the gun here?
My honourable friend is a tireless campaigner for the Wilva nuclear site in her constituency. Now, she knows at the spring budget the Chancellor announced that Great British Nuclear has reached an agreement to purchase the site at Wilva, and these and one other site will be vital to achieving our aim of more energy security from nuclear power. Decisions haven't yet been made on the final site to be used, but as ever she makes a very strong and compelling case for her area, and as soon as a decision has been made, I know that the Energy Secretary is keen to update her at the earliest opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In March, the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman's report into 1950s women's state pension injustice made clear to the government that the Department for Work and Pensions was guilty of maladministration, that these women suffered significant injustice, that they were owed compensation, and that Parliament must urgently identify a mechanism for redress.
Yes.
Nearly 279,000 of women have already died waiting for justice. So when will the Prime Minister finally place before this House a mechanism for appropriate redress?
Well said.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said to the House last week, I understand the strong feelings across the Chamber about these matters and the desire for urgency in addressing them. And following the Ombudsman's multi-year investigation, it is imperative that we take the time to thoroughly review the findings, and I'm not entirely sure...
Take the time! What the hell is wrong with you? Did you not just listen to the bloody questions she put to you? These people are dying. How dare you say take their time? What the hell is wrong with you? How dare you say such a thing? How dare you? These people have suffered enough. Give them the goddamn compensation. Take your time. What a bloody cheek you are.
I agree with her characterisation of all of them so far, but broadly we are committed to making sure that pensioners have the dignity and security they deserve.
By letting them die without doing anything about it. Just watching them die off.
Including through the triple lock, which is increasing pensions by £900 this year. But I welcome tomorrow's debate on the Ombudsman's report, and we will of course take all views into account as we identify and implement next steps.
Well, let's hope tomorrow, from that debate, the government actually pulls its finger out and does something about it.
Thomas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that my right honourable...
Good to see you, Sir Larry the Cat.
...friend, the Prime Minister, takes a personal interest in community pharmacy. Community pharmacists play an essential role in reducing pressure on urgent care services by helping people prevent ill health and managing long-term conditions. Pharmacy First is a good example of government commitment to community pharmacy. However, community pharmacy are under extreme financial pressure, and some are closing, including in St Ives. This year, 177 pharmacies have closed compared to 116 last year. Will my right honourable friend do everything he can to ensure funds are directed towards community pharmacy so that our pharmacy friends can help government to deliver NHS services where and when they are most needed?
Minister. As my honourable friend knows, I do care deeply about the future of our community pharmacies. There are over 10.5 community pharmacies across the country working incredibly hard to serve their patients, and I'm pleased that around 80% of people live within a 20-minute walk of a pharmacy, and that's why we're backing them with Pharmacy First, with £645 million of extra funding, whereby people can now go and see their pharmacist rather than their GP to get treatments for the 7 most common ailments like ear infections and the like. And this will ensure that not only can they get treatments closer to home, Mr. Speaker, but it will help deliver our plan to cut waiting lists and get people the care they need more quickly.
Lyndon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 North Tyneside schools have been identified with a structural problem, not RAC, with hundreds of pupils now taught off-site. Costs of putting these schools right significantly outweigh the £3.5 million SCA fund for all of North Tyneside. Will the Prime Minister ensure the Department of Education applies the policy that, if it's alerted to significant issues with a building that cannot be managed with local resources, it will provide additional support on a case-by-case basis?
Reasonable question.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Lady for raising the case. As she knows, the Department for Education has provided extensive support and funding to all those schools that had RAC, which in the end was less than 1%, I think, of all schools that could have been affected. And more generally, given the very significant amounts we're investing in school rebuilding and maintenance, I'm sure that the Education Secretary would have heard her concerns and will write to her in due course.
Almost as if this is like, yeah, okay, we're fully aware of it, but we're not giving you more money. But, you know, more warships, guys. We need more warships and defence spending, you know, because priorities, right? Priorities.
Ben? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The clear message from yesterday's Farm to Fork Summit is that food security matters. So as we await today's written statement on ground-mounted solar, can my right honourable friend assure me that the thousands of acres of agricultural land proposed for solar installation in my constituency, from a 2,100-acre installation in the Claydons called Rosefield to smaller but equally destructive ones such as near the village of Kimblewick, now have less chance of getting approved?
Honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this, and particularly at a time of increasing geopolitical risk, we must protect this nation's food security and therefore our most valuable agricultural land. Now, we can achieve our solar deployment targets and do that on brownfield sites, rooftops, and away from our best farmland. I know he'll look forward to the Energy Secretary's statement later today, which will ensure that we do avoid using our best agricultural land, because like him, I agree that we should be backing British farmers to produce more food. That's good for our country, good for our economy, and good for our food security.
Ellen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've seen for myself the mouldy and damp accommodation that our military families are sometimes forced to live in.
Shocking.
So I was disappointed this week to find out that the officer in charge of accommodation wrote to families this month to say that requests for non-urgent repairs are not currently affordable. The Prime Minister has spent this week claiming that defence is a priority. So when is he going to prioritise a safe, warm and decent home for the servicemen and women who put their lives on the line for us?
Well said.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're committed to ensuring that our armed forces personnel and their families have safe and well-maintained accommodation. At this point, 96% of service family accommodation meets or exceeds the government's decent home standard.
That is a lie. Literally. That's a blatant lie. I'm sorry. I'm not accepting that statistic whatsoever from Rishi Sunak. I'm not accepting that. I've heard more than enough stories about veterans who are being treated in abhorrent condition, in some terrible conditions. Literally, just literally, I think it was a day or two ago, there was a homeless man who was a veteran, who was a soldier defending this country, and he's not getting any help whatsoever. And he's out on the street. How dare him put a statistic like that up to saying that we are defending veterans? You are not defending veterans. How dare you even say that? You are so insulting. Absolutely insulting to our veterans to say that.
And last year, we put aside an extra £400 million investment.
Yeah, where's that £400 million investment? Right, okay, you put aside money. We hear you say all the time that you've put record investment here, there and everywhere. Well, why are people never seeing that difference, that change all the time, Prime Minister? Can you explain that? Oh, wait, you can't do that.
to improve things. And when issues are reported, the Ministry of Defence has set up a dedicated hotline to ensure that those complaints are investigated by a professional surveyor. And I know that there have been several improvements made specifically to the accommodation in her area.
Afternoon, Reg.
But again, we are able to continue backing our armed forces personnel and for the job that they do for us, because we are the only party in this place committed to increasing our defence spending.
Mr. Speaker, this week the all-party parliamentary group on birth trauma published our first report called Listen to Mums, Ending the Postcode Lottery on Perinatal Health. This was the first national inquiry by cross-party politicians on this issue, and we received more than 1,300 testimonials from the public. So can I thank the Health Secretary first for attending our report launch on Monday, and I'm delighted she's agreed to our headline recommendation for a national comprehensive maternity strategy to be published by NHS England. So can I ask the Prime Minister to fully back our report and implement all of our recommendations to ensure that all mothers in this country get the aftercare that they deserve?
Hear, hear.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Member for Stafford for her incredible campaigning on this issue. When we met and discussed, she presented me personally with a copy of this important report, and I'm hugely grateful to her and the APPG on birth trauma for carefully considering the report, and indeed all those brave women who have come forward to share their stories. I'm delighted that the Secretary of State and the NHS CEO both support the overarching recommendation for a comprehensive national strategy to improve maternity services. We will update the House on next steps in due course, but we are fully committed to improving the quality and consistency of care for women throughout pregnancy, birth and the critical months that follow.
Final question, in other words.
Mr. Speaker, when adult rape cases are taking 2 years on average to complete, it's no wonder that 62% of all rape survivors now drop out of the process. When just 2.5% of rapes recorded last year have resulted in a charge, and fewer still will end in conviction, it's no wonder that the Victims Commissioner, Rape Crisis and others have argued that rape has been effectively decriminalised in this country. Is the Prime Minister not ashamed that because of his government's failings, victims and survivors are being put through a living hell in our criminal justice system?
And before, obviously, regurgitates his usual like tough on crime nonsense, I've covered, I've covered on this channel, and some of you guys may or may not have known, I've covered the stories of how not just how the cases themselves have been problematic, but also the austerity cuts that have been to our criminal justice system that have played a factor into this as well. I reported on covered a video where some people are waiting as 5.5 years, as long as 5.5 years, to have their case heard. Yeah, when it comes to rape. Now, I don't care what excuses the government has. This is absolutely unacceptable on every single level. We are letting women down on this, and it is shameful. And many cases, there are many cases out there now where some women just will not go through with it and will just have to live with the guilt of knowing that they never got the justice they deserved, because of our criminal justice system is so broken right now because of so much cutting down of it. It has been by this Prime Minister and this austerity government that has played a fundamental factor in the demise of it. It really has. How can any rape victim be asked to wait for such a long period to have their case heard? How can you ask anyone, literally anyone, to have their case heard? Oh, just wait 5.5 years. How can you ask someone to have that on their conscience? I just can't accept this. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. It really is. And listen, I know a lot of people here in the chat. I know a lot of people here in the chat are sceptical of Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. But I generally believe that Keir Starmer, who is someone who's worked in the Crown Prosecution Service, for what he has done, he will crack down on this. I generally believe he will crack down on this, and I hope that he will make sure that investment is put into the criminal justice system, so that that more is done and more help is needed to help these cases, and give women more comfort to be able to come forward and be more open about the rapes that they have occurred, and that justice can be brought upon those violent, disgusting people who have caused these atrocities and left these scars on the women that they have done. I generally believe that he will do that, because he has covered these cases and he has heard these cases. He knows what some of these women have gone through. I generally believe that, and I generally hope that that they will do something about this, the Labour Party, when they come into power.
Well, Mr. Speaker, while it's right that the Honourable Lady raises this incredibly important topic, I completely disagree with her characterisation of how this government has treated it. It's actually this government previously that introduced the Rape Review Action Plan, which is now showing significant improvements to how we treat rape end to end through the criminal justice system.
I've just literally highlighted just how bad the system is right now. And here he is saying to everyone that they've made improvements when there have been significantly independent reviews. Victims have spoken out to media outlets and whatnots of saying of how long it takes for some of them to get cases against them. And here you have a Prime Minister sitting on the dispatch box saying that we're dealing with this issue, that we're staying on top of this. You are not dealing with this, Prime Minister. You are not dealing with this. You are letting women down. You are letting victims down. That is the serious reality.
Violence against women and girls is now a strategic policing requirement for the first ever time. We've rolled out Operation Sorteria so that police forces have the expertise that they need. We've actually quadrupled funding for victim support with more independent domestic sexual violence offender advisors. There's a new 24/7 support for victims. We've ended the digital strip search, provided pre-trial cross-examination, all of which, by the way,
I agree to disagree respectively, Stephen Banker. On this particular topic, I disagree respectively on that.
Has meant an improvement in the process, and we have seen an increase in the average sentence to rape by a third since Labour were last in office. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, we did that using a power that her party voted against.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
Not the best question to end Prime Minister's to end PMQs on, but that last one, obviously, I stand by the position that I generally do believe that Labour, that because of Keir Starmer's history, that he will do more when it comes to rape victims. I generally believe that. But that's all right if you don't want to agree with me on that position, that's fine. But yes, obviously, Reg just brings up the point about the defection from last week's PMQs that happened as well, and that's a very good valid point there as well, without a shadow of a doubt, Reg. Obviously, what happened with that as well has obviously raised questions as well about Labour's integrity as well. Just on PMQs itself, I thought Keir Starmer was pretty solid with some of his questions. A bit of fumbling there wasn't very ideal. Sunak did not push the Jeremy Corbyn button, but it's just a regurgitating of the same stuff that you hear from Sunak all the time, saying that they're doing their job and they're doing their job and they're doing this and they're doing that, and you're not seeing enough of it. There, I thought Stephen Flynn rightfully to be portrayed in any way, shape or form, him and his party in any way comparisons to North Korea, China or Russia or anything shape or form is nothing short of this upheaval and disgusting in any way, shape or form. It should not be in any way. I just think that's just absolutely shameful whatsoever. To make those kind of comparisons towards Scotland, I think that's incredibly disgusting to say the least, that's for sure, guys. But what did you guys make of Prime Minister's questions today? What did you guys make of those thoughts? What did you guys make of Sunak's performance? What did you guys make of Keir Starmer's performance? What did you make of Stephen Flynn's performance in today's Prime Minister's Questions? Let me know your thoughts and more down in the comment section down below. Just before I head out, I just want to remind you guys that I will be live again at 8 o'clock tonight. We'll be looking at some of the latest clips and videos online, and we'll be giving our reaction to them in the UK as well as abroad. We'll likely be looking at some stuff in Gaza again, most likely as well. So if you guys got nothing else planned tonight, do feel free to come and hang out with me for the Snowflake Watch. Thank you to everyone who's come along here for Prime Minister's Questions Live. Greatly appreciate it. I hope you guys have a rest of a good day, whatever you guys are doing. But until then, I just have one more thing I need you guys to do before you head out. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. It'd be greatly appreciated. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video. And subscribe, because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me and the work that I do here, you could do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Or join me on Rumble or Patreon or Facebook for exclusive content on those platforms as well. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.
Thank you.